We're only a few days away from the NHL Trade Deadline. Today we're going to get you caught up with all the latest trade rumors concerning the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, Carolina Hurricanes, and we also have some news in the waiver wires. We'll get into all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now we're going to kick things off with some news on the waiver wire. The Buffalo Sabres have announced that they've placed defenseman Zach Bogosian on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. So clearly he will become an unrestricted free agent as of tomorrow and be able to sign a new contract with any other NHL team. As long as he signs before the trade deadline expires, he would be eligible to play for that team in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. Certainly, there's lots of defensemen have already moved. There's still teams looking for defense, and clearly if they can sign him rather than give up an asset, that very well might be a move they would be willing to make. He probably would be signing, I'm guessing, a fairly cheap contract for the remainder of this season and continue to prove himself and then become an unrestricted free agent in the summertime again is more than likely what's going to happen. I would imagine some teams out there, like the Maple Leafs, for example, who are tight up against the cap, looking for help on the blue line, will likely inquire at the very least to see what it might take to sign Bogosian, but he did not want to report to their American Hockey League affiliate, and they've decided to terminate, so I guess we'll see where he ends up next. Now, yesterday's waivers had a few players on it. Goaltender Louis Domingue was placed on waivers by the Devils. He did end up clearing, so he will go down to the minors for now. I do think there's a pretty good chance he will be traded. They had recalled Corey Schneider as well, who has spent a good chunk of the season down in the minors too. So we'll see what the Devils do, but Domingue is certainly a trade target. And also on waivers was Ottawa Senator defenseman Cody Golobuff, who for the most part has been a healthy scratch quite a significant period of time this year. He's been a number 7D in Ottawa and has found himself up in the press box more than on the ice, but he was placed on waivers and was claimed by the Detroit Red Wings. So he'll head over to Detroit for the remainder of this season, and we'll see where he ends up next. I'm not sure if he'll be able to remain in the NHL or not. He's a player that's kind of gone in and out of the NHL, ended up playing in the last Winter Olympics where the NHL players did not participate. So we'll see what happens with him, but for now he's a member of the Detroit Red Wings. We've seen some players held out of action already for precautionary reasons. Like for example, last night the Ottawa Senators kept Nemestikov out of the lineup. Many felt a trade was very close to happening, that Pierre Dorion was kind of mulling over multiple offers and having discussions with a variety of NHL teams. There was believed to be about 3 or 4 or 5 teams in the mix for his services. He got off to a really hot start after the Senators acquired him earlier this year offensively, but since then has settled into a pretty good penalty killing specialist, has been very dangerous shorthanded. He's a good skater. He can play center and the wing, so he can be a versatile guy who can kind of go up and down your lineup. So with the playoffs not far away, teams looking for help, especially defensively and on the PK, are very interested in his type of services. So we'll see what happens with Nemestikov. He is on an expiring contract, so there's not very much risk involved. The Ottawa Senators had acquired him from the Rangers for a 4th round pick earlier this year, so I would think they would try to get at least that, if not more, in return. I think he could probably go for a 2nd or 3rd rounder, depending on the team, of course, maybe a prospect. But it is very likely he will be moved for something ahead of the deadline. Now, there's also been more contract talks with J.G. Pageau in the Senators. Pierre Dorion and Newport Sports have been talking about a potential extension now that just only come up here in the past few days. Not quite clear exactly how quickly things can come together. As of last night, at least, it was reported that there was no trade that was close, and the contract didn't appear to be close either, so it could still go either way. Some insiders believe it's about a 50-50 chance of him staying or going, and others think that it's more likely that he is traded. I guess it really boils down to what the offers are looking like. I know the Senators will really seem to be keen on getting a 1st round pick. If they're not able to get that, they might decide to hang on to Pageau and continue the negotiations. Just because they don't have a contract done by Monday afternoon, it doesn't mean that they could not come to terms and agree to sign him to an extension beyond that or into the early part of the offseason or whatever. I mean, they'd have his rights right up until July 1st, so I guess we will see what happens with Pageau, but still a lot of uncertainty on his future in the nation's capital. Now, it's been reported over the last number of days that the Vancouver Canucks had a lot of interest in Wayne Simmonds, especially once they learned that Michael Furlan would be out for the remainder of the regular season and playoffs. But now it's being reported that they may be out on Wayne Simmonds. I think their interest is still there, but they may not be able to do it from a cap perspective. A couple other things are kind of happening. One is there is some belief that Brock Boeser could actually be back before the regular season is up, which means they need to make sure there's space to activate him onto the active roster. And secondly, there's been some rumors about the possibility of a trade with the Maple Leafs. Now, I guess we'll see what happens. The Canucks are believed to have at least contacted the Leafs to discuss the possibility of acquiring defenseman Tyson Barrie. Now, as we know, the Vancouver Canucks were believed to be trading for Barrie before the Leafs did this past offseason. They were very close to making that acquisition. Had to go down a different road. The Canucks also were inquiring on PK Subban at one point as well. So they've been clearly looking for a offensive right shot D to play high up on their lineup, which is yet to be something that they've been able to make happen. Barrie hasn't worked out in Toronto. There's some belief that the Leafs might be shopping Barrie, but more than not believe that the Leafs are really just fielding calls because other teams can see that Tyson Barrie hasn't really worked out the greatest in Toronto and that they very well might be willing to move him should the right package go their way. Now, clearly the Leafs would need another defenseman in return. As I discussed in my last trade rumor video, it is a possibility they could look to move Barrie, but they're not going to want to move him for just any kind of package. They're likely going to need another right shot defenseman, or at the very least, they're going to need another package come to them that they could turn around and flip to another team who could then trade them another right shot defenseman. But it has to work for the salary cap purposes, and it also has to work for the positional need that they're going to have. You got to remember as well that the Avalanche retained a big chunk of Barrie's salary, so the Leafs are not actually on the hook for a big chunk of that. So it's a low cap hit for Toronto, so they can't just swap him for a much bigger cap hit without other money going out or other parts being involved. From the Canucks side of things, there was some belief that the Canucks would possibly include Troy Stetcher in a deal with the Leafs to possibly acquire Barrie. I don't think that would be enough on its own. I really don't know what the parts would be. The fact is, though, reports are that the Canucks have inquired, and we'll see that the Leafs are actually at least listening, and couldn't they find a deal that makes sense for them to trade Barrie while making the team better? Clearly, they're not going to want to make their team any weaker, so they have to believe that if they do move him, whatever comes in on defense to replace him is going to make them a better team. Now, I guess Zach Bogosian being out there as a free agent is a possibility, but he's a very different kind of defenseman than Barrie. I would think that they're going to want somebody who's pretty decent defensively, but also can pitch in on the offense. I mean, they also have Morgan Rielly who can handle that main offensive role once he's back and healthy, and they're not getting as much offense out of Barrie as they were hoping that they would. Clearly, the Leafs have to be careful here, or not really think that Dubas is out there shopping them hardcore. It's just a matter of listening to offers to see if they can make the team better, and it's certainly having two of Canada's teams hook up on a fairly significant trade like that. Certainly something interesting to think about, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Now, two other teams that appear to be linked here as well, and there's been numerous reports, numerous rumors, is the Carolina Hurricanes and the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the Habs have been linked to a few other teams as well, primarily Colorado, but there's been a growing interest apparently from the Canes on Habs defenseman Jeff Petrie. Now, we've talked about Petrie before and the possibility of the Habs trading him along with a guy like Thomas Tatar. They have term left in their contract, but not a lot of term. Usually when guys are having a 1 year left and are having good seasons, that's attractive to other teams at the deadline who don't want to just acquire rental players. And we know that the Carolina Hurricanes are one of those teams. They would like to have a defenseman who can somewhat replace Dougie Hamilton, and Tom Dundon, the owner, is not a fan of giving up assets for rentals. He would prefer they make an acquisition with a player with some term on his deal, and Petrie certainly fits that bill. He's a pretty solid puck mover. He's got a lot of experience, and he can somewhat replace Hamilton, not to the fullest extent, but he would be one of the better options out there who could at least come close. And apparently, Pierre LeBrun's reporting that he believes that the Carolina Hurricanes are willing to offer a first-round pick, probably the one that belonged to the Maple Leafs that they acquired in a Marleau deal, as well as prospect defenseman Jake Bean. I would think if Marc Bergevin is actually offered that for Petrie, does he not have to take that deal? At least I would think so. He gets a really solid young defenseman in Jake Bean, who's been putting together some really solid American Hockey League seasons since he's been drafted the past couple years. He's put up 82 points in 119 American Hockey League games. Many believe he is fully ready for the NHL. The only reason he's not getting the opportunity is because of the Carolina Hurricanes blue line having a lot of other guys ahead of him, but at most other teams he'd be in the NHL. I followed this player quite closely since he's been drafted. He's made tons of progress, and I do think he'd be a great addition to a team like Montreal. You throw in a first-round pick. As much as they really like Jeff Petrie, that's a pretty substantial offer. I would think Bergevin really should accept that deal should that actually be presented. Now, there's been some different rumors and clarification out there. Pierre LeBrun has said that he cannot confirm that was actually offered, but they have had talks, and he believes that the Carolina Hurricanes would be willing to make that offer. So if they did, I guess we'll see if he accepts or not. And said the other link between the Habs and the Avalanche continue on guys like Tomas Tatar and even Ilya Kovalchuk. Now, there's been some talk on Kovalchuk and his potential willingness to stay in Montreal. Marc Bergevin and his agents have had discussions on a potential extension, and they believe it would likely be a one-year deal around $3.5 million with some bonuses included, which could bring him up to around $5 million or so if he were able to achieve those bonuses. I would think the bonuses will likely be tied to a combination of games played and goals scored, whether or not the Habs make the playoffs, those types of things. So I guess we'll see what happens if he actually stays, but it's even possible they could have like a handshake agreement in place. They could trade him for a playoff run with another team and then re-sign him in the offseason. If he's happy there, then it's certainly a strong possibility for sure. But like I said, the Avalanche and the Habs have been having a lot of talks. I don't think it's any coincidence that Marc Bergevin has been in Colorado, and at the same time the Hurricanes are scouting him quite closely as well. I guess we'll see what the Montreal Canadiens do, but they're in a position right now that they don't really have to make a lot of deals. They don't have a lot of players that they absolutely have to sell off or that they should sell off. But if the right offers come along for some of these players that would help them down the road, I think they have to listen and possibly make some trades. So let me know your thoughts on some of these Habs deals down in the comments, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. I'll keep you up to date with all the breaking news for NHL Trade Deadline 2020, and we'll discuss all the deals as they happen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.